When you work in any industry or you follow sports or you talk about coming to the very top of your game, they refer to it as being an icon. In sports, there's a bunch of icons that are identified with particular sports. Vin Scully in baseball, Keith Jackson, oh Nelly in college football. In auto racing, Ken Squire. Icons do more than just work at the top of their game. Icons provide inspiration for folks who want to follow in their footsteps and when they're young, aren't sure if they'll ever be able to do that. So in addition to being at the top of the game, they provide that inspiration. Now for those of us that want to follow in their footsteps, when you're young, you look and think, oh, that may be a little too big of a reach. So you look at regional icons, and that's the case with this next inductee. Like me, the iconic voices of the New England area were Tom Gallen, were Jimmy Power, were of course the one and only Bill Welch. After a period of time, you had to scratch yourself or pinch yourself and say, I'm working with them. And then a little bit of other time proceeds, and you've left, and you've moved on to pursue the next icon. For Mike Joy, the path started at Riverside Park, but it was a path that was paved with passion. He was one of the original storytellers. Mike defined not only New England broadcasting, but when he moved on to Motor Racing Network and then to CBS and to TNT, he never forgot where he came from. He never forgot his roots. And he was quick, with a quip, to remind worldwide audiences of where he came from and what those folks that he covered and aspired to cover when he was at Riverside, at Stafford, at Thompson, at Waterford, putting word pictures to short track aces like Georgie Summers and Bob Palvareri and the Christopher brothers, to remind them that some of the very best racing took place right in the New England states. But along the way, he became associated with the epitome of motorsports broadcasting. You see, Mike Joy climbed that ladder, rung by rung. Never fueled by ego, but fueled by an abiding passion to be the very best at the profession he chose. He has paid us back in many, many ways, but he has also given his peers, the folks on a national level that he has worked with, an abiding appreciation for what we have going here, right in the great state of New England. Some of us, like me, choose to go just so far. I was a pit announcer. I'll always be a pit announcer. I'll let you in on a secret. I did not enjoy when I did play-by-play, but Mike did. And Mike proved very early on he was really, really good at it. Now I want to ask you, just to picture this for just a second. For almost 20 years, Mike Joy was commissioned with the role of being the gatekeeper for Darrell Waltrip. Just imagine that for a second. And in between, they've thrown in other casts of characters in there, where it was wild and wacky Jeff Hammond or a Larry McReynolds whose face was buried in the latest stats. But there was always a calming tone. If it was tragedy, Mike Joy was the one that delivered us the message with dignity and class. If it was excitement, Mike Joy was the one that didn't oversell it, but let that excitement just flow over you. I'm proud to be inducting Mike Joy into this Hall of Fame, but I forgot my phone because there's somebody special wanted to send you a message. Give me 1 minute.
In Victory Lane in Daytona in 1989, and so he's been around way before that, and he's certainly been around ever since then. But Mike is like the steadying force. You put Mike Joy in the booth with me and Larry McReynolds like we did back in '01, And, you need somebody like him that's got a sense of the business and what works and what doesn't work. And Mike always looking at me and Larry telling us to let it breathe. And he's just got a real knack, a real TV personality, got that great voice, knowledgeable. There's no one that knows more trivia than Mike Joy, and usually finds a way to use it. And he's a real pro. I believe Ken Squire will always be, our friend and somebody we all love and think a lot of. But Mike Joy is right in the same class with Ken Squire, Barney Hall, all those great voices, all those knowledgeable people, all those people that have dedicated their life to this sport and done a great job of covering it for many, many years, whether it was in the pits or in the booth. I'm a big Mike Joy fan, always have been.
Mike Joy, ladies and gentlemen, an icon. Come on up here.
Do I have to hear it again?
No, I sent it to you in an email so you can take it home.
Thank you, Jack, and thank Daryl for me. And thanks to Near and to all of you associated with the Hall of Fame. This is big. This is such a long time in coming. I'm kind of happy it took so long because the statute of limitations has now run out on a lot of the things we did back then. And I was a little nervous about today because the last time Jack Arute stood up and made a speech for me, I ended up on honeymoon in Bermuda, and he disappeared with a bridesmaid and wasn't seen for 3 days. True story. And with that, why do we need announcers? Well, that was answered before I came to Stafford Motor Speedway. Bill Slater was running the track, and you all knew Bill, and how Bill talked very quickly in a very clipped tone, very clipped voice, and Jimmy Powers was the announcer. And one night at the racetrack, as I heard the story, Powers shows up and he's a little indisposed. Can't go on the microphone, so Slater goes up to the booth and takes the microphone in hand as the first heat comes to turn 4, and he goes, "There's Bugsy Stevens, and there's Freddie DeCero, and there's Leo Cleary, and there's Georgie Summers, and here they come in green flag. Look at them some bitches go!" And realizing what he did probably the first recorded mic drop and never picked one up again. So they needed people like Wally Saliba, Tom Gallen, Paul Baker, Charlie Crocco, Raleigh Jacobs, of course Ken Squire, our mentor, and Bill Welch. And I owe Bill, when I started there, I knew how to talk. I knew what I was talking about, and I could do it with enthusiasm and passion. I hadn't learned how to listen. And had I listened better, I could have learned so much about what Bill Welch thought were the glory days of auto racing. For me, the glory days were the early and mid-'70s. When we transitioned in the modifieds from straight axle, split spring Flemke front ends to independent suspension. When I started in this sport, the chassis of these cars either came off 57 Chevys, or in the case of this oddball thing Ali Silva had, a Model A Ford, and to tube frame chassis that were sketched out in chalk on the cement floor of a garage and welded together. And by the time I left New England to go down south, we had great store-bought race cars from Maynard Troyer, from Richie Evans, those beautiful cars from Chassis Dynamics. And instead of being painted in the backyard, it was folks like Holmes and Bear doing the cars, Brian Sines, Joe Garrity, Jake Hafke, putting the graphics on them, making them beautiful. So to see all of that develop and to see the sport develop, it really was a magical time. So my thanks to the Carrolls, to the Honigs, to the Arutes for indulging me, because I got to come in on Friday or Saturday night or Sunday afternoon and play on the microphone and do what I had learned from Ken Squire, from Jack Arute, from Bill Welch. Make these fellas into your heroes. I was so green in 1970 when I started doing this, and I was a fan of Can-Am and Trans Am and Formula One, and my heroes were fellows like Dan Gurney, A.J. Foyt, Parnelli Jones. And I got to Riverside Park, and I thought all these drivers were full-time racers. I didn't realize that Billy Greco was a long-haul trucker, that Bob Polverari was building houses and apartment buildings, that Bob Stefanik drove an oil truck. that all of these people had 5-day-a-week big jobs, but then on Saturday nights, they were our heroes. And what they were doing behind the wheel of those cars was magical. Today, I watched a race a couple of weeks ago, Cup race, and these cars are so aerodynamically glued down to the track, it just looks like I-91 traffic at 3 times the speed. But boy, on a fifth mile, quarter mile, half mile track, you see these drivers manhandling these 600 horsepower beasts, bending them to their will, sliding them around the corners. And damn it, that's exciting. And that was a wonderful time to be in this sport. We transitioned from coupe-bodied and coach-bodied cars to Pintos and Vegas and Gremlins. And cars, did we have cars? We had Speedway Scene, thanks to Val Lasseur. We had Checkered Flag Announcer, thanks to Paul Tremaine. The millennials in the crowd will not understand how we used to make a toll call to Willimantic, Connecticut to get the news of what happened at the track the night before and listen to a recorded message to find out what happened. That's what we had to do. We had Illustrated Speedway News, National Speed Sport News, a raft of magazines, and now few are left. There's Area, and there's Speedway Illustrated, and thank you for that, to help chronicle our sport for the next generation to have fun with. It was a golden age. I was reading Speedway Scene from 1973 the other night. 53 modifieds in the pits at Riverside Park. 20 would qualify for the feature event. Just incredible. There was also there was a little racing on the radio. There was this thing called the Rennie Charland Racing Program. Now, how many of you remember der champ, 4-time national champ from Agawam? So Rennie found a money-making deal where he'd have a weekly radio show. And the only problem with that was the show was in Springfield, Mass, and Rennie was spending his Saturday nights racing at Fonda, New York. So he called me up to help with the radio show. So I go over to this little studio, and Rennie's telling everybody how Lou Lazzaro did him wrong at Fonda. That dirty, no-good Lou Lazzaro, the monk, you know. And his throw to commercial was epic. He'd say, now we got to go pay for some of this here show. And they'd run a commercial. So finally it came time. He goes, oh, you know what, Claremont, you know, up there, what's his name, Punky Karen won the race, and up at Mana, it don't matter, they got rained out. And that was how Rennie did the show. So I'm going to tell you everything happened at Riverside. So I've got my notes of who ran where in the heats and the feature, and I'm going through this, and I'm really reading it, going, and I go to reach to turn the page, and he has lit my notes on fire with his cigar. And I didn't even notice. But it's all the fun we could have, you know, it really was. The transition, well, let's see. Stafford. You know, it always bugged me at Riverside and at Stafford and at Thompson that the novelty acts drew more people than the really good modified racing. You could pack the place for Demolition Derby, 3,000 people would show up to see the greatest show on earth when the modifieds had run. Well, at Stafford we didn't have Demolition Derby because Jackie's dad did not want the track torn up by those junkers. But we had specialty acts. We booked a guy named Rex Blackwell, a motorcyclist, and he was going to jump a spinning helicopter on the front straightaway. Until the DMV intervened and thought that was not a very good idea. Nobody wanted to see him jump a non-spinning helicopter, so that was that. We had a guy called Jimmy Crash Moreau, the main maniac. And Jimmy's act was he did a ramp-to-ramp jump over a bunch of school buses. You've seen this stuff on Wide World of Sports and maybe at some of your local tracks. Well, the trouble with Jimmy Moreau was when he was looking straight at you, he was also seeing Rick Fuller over here with his other eye. Things didn't quite work so well for poor Moreau. So he gets the ramps all lined up and everything's measured out to the inch, and he gets in the car and he starts making laps, and he comes and he pulls right up next to Peter Locke with the pace car. He says, the speedometer doesn't work. He says, I have to be going exactly 45 miles an hour or I miss the ramp. Will you pace me around the track? So Peter paced him side by side, 45 miles an hour, 2 laps. Here goes Jimmy Moreau, and the car goes up the ramp. and then clears the ramp. Comes down on the school buses. Here comes the ambulance, comes running over, and Moreau crawls out of the car. I'm standing there trackside. Jack's up in the booth. He wants the microphone. Oh, I mean, he's got a broken leg. He's got bones sticking out of his leg, but he wants to talk to the crowd, and he tells them, I'm going to come back. I'm going to make this jump. I'm going to come back. People went crazy. So next year, what do? We booked him again. The place is packed. Almost a Spring Sizzler size crowd. And same song, second verse. He goes up with the car, and he goes off the ramp, and he comes down. The left wheels come down on the right ramp. The ramp crashes all the car goes rolling into the guardrail. You know, same thing. Here comes the ambulance. The fans are going crazy. This is the greatest thing they've ever seen. They cart him. He tells them, I'll be back. They cart him off to the hospital again. Next year, we got to bring him back, right? He's got his act together. The car takes off. It sails off the ramp. It does a perfect 4-point landing on the other ramp, spins to a stop. He jumps out of the car. Ta-da! And people are throwing things at him, booing. Nobody came to see him make it. Yeah, special events. Crash Moreau. I got to thank a couple of people here, and I'm not going to tell you 50 years worth of stories, I promise. I need to thank people who loaned me their race cars against their better judgment, so I could see what going half fast was like. Dick Goulet, Bob Pulvereri, Marty Radwick, Steve Avanchin, Jeff Fuller, Kenny Epsman. I drive his cars now in historic Trans Am, and just have a ball doing it. My brother David and his wife Barbara, he's the head of the Board of Education here in South Windsor. My sister Susan and her husband Bruce, and my sister Carrie and her husband Bobby. My wife of 22 years would love to be here. She's recovering from hip surgery and can't put any weight on that leg, so she's at home. And thank you, Gabe. And my kids, of whom I am most proud. Katie is a sophomore at Belmont in Nashville. She's in the Mike Curb School of Music Business. She's going to be a concert promoter. Loves the music business. My son Scott is a junior at Northeastern. He is studying finance and entrepreneurship. He grew up wanting to be Jimmy Johnson and race bandoleros and Legends cars, and we bought a lot of bumpers. Got a win and a flip at Waterford. One made his mom very happy, the other not so. You never want to call home and your first words are, Scott's okay, but... now he wants to be Roger Penske. I think that's a great career path. Hell, I'd like to be Roger Penske. Who wouldn't? Celebrate your 82nd birthday by buying a racetrack, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. That guy is my hero. Absolutely. So apologies to Scott and Caitlin for all those times I had to tell them work comes first. But they have turned out great, and I am so proud of them. Bones Bercier, thank you for your efforts making all this necessary today. And Dick Berggren, my longest running and best friend on pit road and in the TV business. It's been an honor. The first time we got together was 1972, the Thompson Challenge Cup Classic, where we shared the microphone at Thompson Speedway, did the PA. I learned a lot from him until about 2 o'clock in the morning when I realized we were in Boston in the combat zone. And ended up at 5 o'clock in the morning desecrating Kathy's kitchen, cooking lobster, because it seemed like the thing to do. Don Barrio and Dick and I, and that's when I decided, wow, I really want to be part of this. This is a lot of fun. And it has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed every minute of it. Don't ever want it to end. Somebody added up the other day that between radio and television, I've called 40 Daytona 500s. And more to come. My sideline, it's my sideline, it's John's living. New England Racing Fuel and my partners, Charlie and Barbara and John and Diane Holland, couldn't ask for better partners and better friends. When Al Feeney first came to us about supporting the mobile Nerf Hall of Fame, when it was first constituted, we were all in, and that's been a thrill ride too. I didn't do this alone. I had great mentors. Ken Squire, as we've all spoken of, Barney Hall, Ned Jarrett. They were my role models, my mentors, and I owe so much to them. The last thing I have is about the photo for the wall. They said, we need an action photo. I go, well,
Pretty good.
well, you know, with my mouth open. I guess that's an action for a broadcaster. That's an action photo. The first photo, the headshot, was taken only 19 years ago. That's what 19 years of boogity, boogity, boogity will do to you between then and now. But Daryl and Larry and Jeff Gordon have been just a treat to work with. Fox gives us all the resources we need to try to make heroes out of these drivers. We're back to that again, and bring it all home for all of you. And that's what we try to do every Sunday. The other photo, so the action photo. I have pictures of me in Victory Lane with people that are my friends and people that are very important and idols to me. Billy Greco, Bob Pulverary, a lot of people, longtime folks. But I chose this particularly because it was one of the first nights that I worked at Stafford, and I was in Victory Lane, and as usual, Bug Stevens had won the race. And with Bill Slater and Ed Yarrington looking on, I'm asking Bugsy a question, and it's a real thoughtful pose that Bugsy has there. And so I guess it must have been a good question, was all I could think of. But as was said at the top of the day, there was Bugsy Stevens and there was everybody else. So I thought, if I'm going to share this photo with somebody, got to be the Bugman, and I'm proud of that. I want to thank all of you and congratulate all of this year's honorees. And let me answer the question I posed at the start of this. Why do you need an announcer? It's not to tell you who's in the cars. It's not to read those endless sponsor promos or remind you what's coming up next. The number one job of every announcer at every track has always been make the fan invest in their heroes and make them walk out of there being damn certain they're going to be right back in that seat next Saturday night. And that's what I've tried to do. Thank you so much.